So welcome everybody to today's webinar on intended purpose, what intended purpose is, and also how it impacts marketing strategies. So my name is Claudia Holy. I'm the founder and managing director of Podymos, a specialist medical device marketing agency. And we have a fantastic panel here today to really answer all the questions you have on this topic. So my objective on this webinar is to share as much information with you as physically possible and really leave no stone unturned. So in order to do that, I'll introduce the panel shortly, but any questions you have throughout the webinar, please add it into the questions at the bottom. We will have a Q&A session later. Any questions that we don't get through, we will answer them after the webinar and send them out as well. So really, it's answering as many questions as possible. So moving on to my panel, or the panel. So the first person really needs no introduction. Munir Al-Azzouzi, welcome.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you.
Munir is founder and CEO of Easy Medical Device, but also host of the podcast. And what a fantastic podcast. Now nearly 200 episodes, absolutely amazing, and really shares fantastic information on quality and regulatory affairs. So if you don't follow Munir, I really would. The information I've received from your podcast has been fantastic. So, we'll discuss some of that information on here.
Sure.
My second panelist is Jacqueline Van Droyten. She is CEO and founder of Clinar, which is really a regulatory company that focuses on the clinical evaluation and regulatory workflows so that your submissions are correct first time. I think Jacqueline is probably the most detail-orientated person I know, so is a fantastic person to be on this panel. So welcome, Jacqueline.
Lovely to meet, and thank you for having me with Munir. Lovely to see you, Munir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's lovely to see you too.
And finally, Becca Brady. Becca is a senior account manager at Podymos, but that really doesn't do Becca any justice at all. Becca came from Informa and was very involved in the EU MDR, a lot of information around that within medical device events, things like that. So has an extensive knowledge in the area and really likes the topic. So talks about it on an ongoing basis. So welcome, Becca.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So I just want to quickly run through what the format of today's webinar will be so that everybody knows what we're going to be talking about. So to start off with, we're really going to look at what is the intended purpose. So how you create an intended purpose. This was really eye-opening for me from a marketing perspective, because I think the intended purpose really sits at the heart of everything that marketers do, but I don't think we realize that sometimes. So I really want to investigate that, and I think it'll be very eye-opening, especially when Munir walks through everything to do with the intended purpose. So we're then going to look at how to manage the intended purpose moving forwards, how to differentiate it and give you a strong competitive advantage. Then we'll have a Q&A session. And finally, we'll have a quick fire questions at the end of the biggest mistakes that we see happening with a creation of intended purpose. So to start off with, Munir, I'll ask you the first question.
Okay.
What is the intended purpose?
Okay, so this is something that we don't hear so much outside of the regulatory affairs department or the quality department, because maybe of the vocabulary that sounds really regulatory, but mainly for me, the intended purpose is mainly the heart of really all what you will do with your quality and regulatory affairs information later, even touching marketing, sales, touching everything. What is also important that people each time I receive some people within my company, so that we are talking about their product, because we have to talk about products, and each time we are asking them, what is the intended purpose? And they ask me, what do you mean by that? What it is for? What are we doing? Why do I need to buy this product exactly? And then they explain to me, etc. And what is important to understand also is the fact that intended purpose can also change the classification of your device. It can also make your device a medical device or not a medical device or pharmaceutical. So the intended purpose is really something that you have to create correctly, because this is driving everything. I have some customers that come to me, and when they tell me the intended purpose, I say, okay, now you are a medical device. But they say to me, but I don't want to be a medical device. How can I remove what should I remove from the intended purpose so that I'm not a medical device? And then we are working on that. Or some others that are not medical device, and they ask me, oh, how can I be a medical device because I want to be a medical device? And then we have to work on the intended purpose. So mainly the intended purpose is first, which population should be using your device? What are the indication, the disease that we are talking about, really how it's working? So mainly the stage of disease, etc. What are the contraindication? Who are the users also? We can have the intended purpose where the layman person, so myself or anybody can use it, but some others where it says, no, it should be the surgeon or it should be a professional user. And you have also how to use it also, the environment. Should it be in a surgical environment or it can be in outside, if I can say rainy, etc. It's fine. Is it invasive, non-invasive, etc. So is it sterile, non-sterile? So all those informations should be gathered, and then it creates, if I can say, the intended purpose.
Yes, and actually we'll go through exactly all those factors within the intended purpose in a short while. So you brought up a really interesting point there about your intended purpose and how it can make you a medical device or not, but it can also affect the classification of your device, depending on what's in your intended purpose. What's the implication of different classes? So,
for example, if you are so one thing, for example, let's talk about software. For example, software, mainly it's class 1 devices under the medical device directive previously. And now under MDR, it becomes class 2A, 2B, 3. And inside the rule of the medical device classification, it says if it is just for gathering information to make a decision, then it's a class 2A. If you are endangering the life of the person with creating some kind of damage and irreversible or reversible damage, if I can say, then it's a class 2B. But if at the end you are kind of killing the person, or it can kill the person, or it can have some irreversible damage, then it's class 3. So here you have to drive your intended purpose to try to stay as low as possible in terms of the danger that can happen. And here, for example, to say it's contraindicated for these people or that people, because if you include them inside, then maybe you are increasing the risk. So the risk, I mean, how you are defining the intended purpose can drive, if I can say, the classification, because in the classification, there are many rules and you have to read each of them. And then when you are starting to read one, you maybe think, I don't want to be on this one because it's a class 2B. So then let's change the intended purpose to remove this claim so that I stay still on class 2A, for example. And this can be the strategy that people are doing, because I mean, more claims you have, more chance maybe your product can go up in the classification.
But this is not always what marketing likes to hear.
Clearly, this is that. And I think we should, I mean, I think today we should really talk about marketing also, because as I said, we are talking a lot about regulatory and quality, but I hope this will open the eyes of people outside of quality and regulatory.
I'd also want to add to that about changing classes is that under the MDR marketing, you just need to follow your intended purpose. But when you look at local guidelines, different countries have stricter marketing rules depending on what class you're in. So if you move into a class 3 device, there are certain countries that has a huge impact on. So that's something to also be aware of when you're doing your intended purpose.
Yeah, and you have to understand that the more the classification is high, more documents, more proofs, more clinical data. I mean, Jacqueline maybe can talk about that. You need more and more and more. So trying to be as low as possible in the class is to help you to have as less work as possible, and then to be able to pass the certification quickly. But the classification is really driving what the notified body will do, how they will look at your device. And you have to know also that the classification can include more steps on your conformity assessment, because before you go only class 1, so you are self-certified, class 2A, 2B, some class 2B are different, but class 2A, 2B are a notified body, and class 2B with some active purpose, which are removing or including the medicines, or class 3 and implantables. You have to go to another step, which is the expert panel. And Jacqueline can talk about that because it's mainly about clinical. And as I said, try to reduce your classification as low as possible. But at the end, you have some products, you have no choice. It's classified like that. So you have no real discussion on this.
Yes, it's problematic if your business development plan was intended to get into a certain population.
Exactly.
You might be snagged, and if you as a regulatory go, oh no, let's get the certification through, and yeah, we'll leave out this population, and that was your business development plan, and your investors with looking at you capturing that market, you know, it's really the intended purpose. As you said, Mania, it brings all of it together to make sure that that business plan is executed in also when you apply for your regulatory approvals.
I feel like we can almost run a whole other webinar on this topic on how the intended purpose impacts your classification systems, which, you know, is, yeah, it has a huge impact. What I'd like to move to now is actually just really looking at the structure of the intended purpose. So Munir, you gave a really good summary of what's included in it, but I think it's really helpful just to break it out on a slide. So I'm just going to share a slide, which Munir, you'll be very familiar with, because actually I think you presented a very similar form of this on one of your webinars.
Okay.
And I thought this was absolutely fantastic. So this is really to have a look at, you know, what is the intended purpose made up of, so that everybody can understand what clinical data you require to support different areas, what are the implications of including things in certain sections and not including things in other. So Munir, if I can ask you first, and then Jacqueline, I'll come to you straight afterwards. I'll just bring up the different sections within these. If you can just walk us through each of these sections, what's included and what the watch-outs are, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So first, we go to patient population, so demographics. So it is important to define, for example, if a device is made for kids, for children, pediatrics, or for adults, for elderly people, for women, for men, for even, if I can say, the ethnicity, it's only for people that are with a dark skin or nationality, if there is some specific gene for it, etc. So you have to really try to segregate as much as possible all that. And it's also important because this will drive also the next step, which will be, if I can say, the clinical data to gather, because then you can restrain and say, I will gather clinical data only on adults, not on pediatrics, because I have no clinical data at all on that. Or I will just look at people that are with the gender male or female, etc. So you have to help, if I can say, the people to understand for who is this specifically designed, because then when you will be placing that on the market, you are targeting only this population. Any population outside of the target normally should not be using that, and you have to be also try to be clear on that. But this is really important because all the clinical data that you have to gather then should include all the information that you are mentioning in this part here.
So just to ask you a question on this. So if you collected your clinical data and all your population within your clinical data happened to be over 80 years old, would you be able to make the claim that this was for all patients over 18, or would you have to have a representative clinical data that actually showed patients over 18? So
maybe Jacqueline can answer this one.
Yes.
So in your intended purpose, whoever you highlighted, that is what you will be CE marked for. Anything that is outside of that is classified as foreseeable misuse. And then you will have a whole list of foreseeably how this will be misused. And the population is one of those indications. So you have to have within your clinical data in your studies, the study must be clear of the population that was studied. And also the exclusions. Any study has an inclusion criteria and an exclusion criteria.
Yes.
So automatically your exclusion criteria from your studies collectively, so obviously you'll have studies that will overlap and you will have maybe a wider and wider population that you can prove your intended purpose. But whatever is the gap is excluded, and it is then automatically in your foreseeable misuse kind of bucket that you will monitor for post-market.
Yeah, just one thing also that is important is when we talk about patient population, we are talking here about creating the intended purpose, but we have all the documents that are linked to that. So we talk about clinical evaluation. We talk about instruction for use, where you have to write for who is this used, and this is document that will be seen by layman person. You have the technical documentation also, because you have also to be clear with the regulator that will be providing you the CE marking. So they have to read the technical file, and they have to see it is for maybe only adults people. So then the idea would be, okay, so it means that in his head that everybody that is using that is only adults. So if he sees somewhere something with a pediatric, then he will be confused. And this is the idea where you have always to have one master document, which should be normally the intended purpose master document, that will be really gathering this information and say, I should talk only about this population and not going outside of that.
You might have data in another population, but you may decide not to use that.
Exactly. And I really recommend to not use it. I mean, the point is that, as you are focusing on one thing, don't confuse the regulators with some data that are outside of the scope then.
So be very focused.
Mm.
Okay, so moving forward to the second section, indications. Jacqueline, can I ask you to explain this section?
So when you come to the indications, it's very much what is a stepping stone into the medical care environment. So one of the things with the population is, obviously, it's for human use. So medical devices, not veterinary. So we're saying, okay, all of these are in human use, but your indications is like, so how does it step into the medical environment? And here we are looking at your procedure in which your device is being used. Is it a specific disease? Is it a specific condition? Is it a condition at a certain stage? If you think of surgery, like a scalpel doesn't get used in a person's condition their whole lifetime. It's at the point that they actually need an incision. So you need to be very specific at what stage of that condition. If it's chronic, if it's for a single event, for a specific procedure, do you use it? Is there ongoing treatment? So one of the things that we find with some of the higher class devices is that you might have a surgical procedure and the device gets used, and it gets used really well. But if you look later down the line, like a hip replacement, it's not a once-off, it worked. It takes a while to recover. It takes a while to actually see if the hip replacement was successful. And there's a period beyond that to make sure that it's still safe. So you have to say, like, what is the period of that indication? Is it a hip replacement for life? Which also means that you need data over a lifetime of a patient or a set time frame that you can prove that it is safe. You cannot prove that it is safe in that period of time. Or let's say a hip replacement, you say it's safe up to 6 months. What you're also saying is that, well, beyond 6 months is probably not. And is the person going to go through a hip replacement again? So there's some practicalities of like the duration of the intervention and when the intervention is complete, and the safety of that intervention needs to be very clear.
But when we're looking at the indications are really looking at what that illness stage looks like, isn't it? Not really how the device will be used, but at what stage of illness the patient is at, what their condition is.
So remember that the procedure is also underpinned at what point in the condition you will need it. So if you have a condition like you've got Parkinson's disease, and you get you're at the point that deep brain stimulation is needed, it may not be an early diagnosis. It will be at later diagnosis. And to say when that is appropriate, you need to say which stage of the condition it is. Yes. And at that stage of the condition, if that is an intervention, how long does that intervention last? So the intervention, the procedure for deep brain stimulation will be at a certain time frame, but you must also be clear, like, how long does it last? What does the performance and the safety period after the end of the intervention look like? And that makes it difficult also with your intended purpose, because you've got to be really specific, because you need safety and performance data to be able to pinpoint the appropriateness for that indication.
Absolutely. So really this also drives, just as we looked at patient population, the indications really drive what clinical data you need to then justify your intended purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the intended user, and I'll also open up the intended use as well, so that we can move through these. So Munir, if I can ask you about intended user, and then Jacqueline, I'll come back to you for intended use.
Yeah, for the intended user, it's really important because you can take any device and you can say, anybody can use it, if I can say. But then you have to prove it. The idea here is mainly to say, for example, a hip implant, as we talked about hip implant, should be used by a qualified surgeon that knows what he's doing, that knows how to implant that. I mean, it's not like somebody that is just coming out of the street and just, let's come to do the implantation. Here, you have to be clear that it's a qualified person that can do that. And here you have to have also some kind of level of training and knowledge. Training, like for a surgeon, he has made a medical school, so he knows, if I can say, the basic things. But sometimes we have also some new technologies, some new devices, some new things. So here you have also, during the development or design, you have also maybe to plan some kind of usability testing, human factors, to verify that the information, as we said, that we are mentioning on the instruction for use or documentation that we are providing to the surgeon is understandable, that everybody understand what we are meaning by this. When we say put it at 30 degrees, what is 30 degrees? I mean, some people will say, okay, should I take a scale and measure 30 degrees when I put this on the leg? I mean, this is also the thing that some designer may understand and may be clear on what they are doing, but some surgeons are not. So here you have to explain everything, qualification, and also maybe to say, before to use that, any surgeon should be trained by our company. They should go through a training course with our professionals so that they can know how to use the device. If you have some devices that are what we call well-established technologies, so then for those ones, I suppose that there is no need for a specific training, but you have to prove all that also within your documentation. And this is why on the intended user, when you are sitting with your managers, with your marketing, everybody, you have to define who should be using that, who is the target person to use that, because then it can change a lot of things on the background.
Absolutely. And the intended user and the intended use will also impact the IFUs that come out later, but we'll talk a little bit later about the associated documents as well. So Jacqueline, moving on to intended use.
So with your intended use, this focuses very much on how the device is used. We spoke about, with the indication, the procedure. This really goes into the detail of what procedure is the entry point for the device. So exactly what procedure you're using, the time point and location of use, what environment is it being used? If you look at a scalpel, is that scalpel being used in surgery? Is it being used in an outpatient treatment room of a dermatologist? Is it being used like an emergency equipment device by first responders in the field? And it could basically be in an environment that there is a lot of hazards. There you've got to be very specific, how long you use it, the location of use, the duration and frequency of use. And I just want to reiterate that duration and frequency of use. You might in surgery use this device for 10 seconds, or you might put a device into somebody. The procedure to put it in is at a certain time, but that device being inside of a person, you've got to be able to show that it performs during that time the way it should. So very short procedure, let's say you've got a surgical morcellator, you must make sure that it can perform the task if a surgery is 10 minutes long, or whether the part of the surgery the device does is 2 hours long, it has the ability to last for that period of time if you can't run out of battery. But also if you have something that you put into somebody that if for the duration of time is in that person, that it will perform as expected for that whole duration. Then the other things is just characteristics. Is it sterile, non-sterile, single use, reusable? Is there other devices that it's compatible with? Should it be used with other things? And then obviously precautions of use, and comes back with what is it compatible with? If it has, if it's electrical, is there electrical safety for the environment in which it needs to be used?
And there seems like there's an awful lot of categories in here. Do all intended purposes need to have all of these categories in, or is it very dependent on the type of device you have?
Very dependent on the type of device with the intended purpose. Sometimes you can help me, Amania. You will have a very complicated device that has so much detail around it that your intended purpose will be very focused to land the key points. And then you've got the other terminology like your intended use, your intended user, that you can during intended use is something that you will also have in most of your technical document. But when it comes to the intended and also intended user, but there's a lot of usability and engineering work that needs to be done to kind of iron out that it's designed in a way for that intended use or intended purpose.
Yeah, and so in terms of the categories, for me, what I advise is first to use the 4 categories. So patient population, indication, intended user, intended use. Inside each of the categories, yes, it depends really on the products. What we are doing, for example, each time we have a customer and we try to understand their products, or we are working with them on the products, we have this form and we have that as a template, and we are try to fill each of the elements. And sometimes we don't feel everything because ethnicity, they say no, and it's obvious also when we look at that, we say no, ethnicity or nationality or gender makes no difference for the use of this device, so then no need to do that. But we are focusing on some elements and say, and what about this and what about that, etc. When we are starting to ask questions to people, and there they start sometimes to say, oh, I don't know that, I should maybe go to my clinical person or to my marketing person to understand. So this is also kind of this can be used kind of a checklist that you can start to fill. But if you have some holes, if you have some missing information, it's not a problem. It's just for you to be guided on what is really important and maybe things to not miss when you are building your intended purpose. But my advice is to keep the 4 categories as is, even on your technical documentation or on your information, just to have always those 4 categories and try to fill out all the information that are inside as much as possible. But it's a case by case. Medical devices, you can go from a wheelchair to a pacemaker to an MRI machine so you cannot put everybody on the same plate.
It's sometimes also worthwhile having all those categories in your technical document and be able then and there to justify why it's not applicable, because you will be asked by your notified body.
Exactly. I mean, I like that because it's what we are doing actually when we are filling the technical files. We have, on the technical documentation, you have many sections that are mentioned on the regulation documents. So, and they say, oh, what about software? What about this? What about that? We keep the software elements in the technical file and we just say it's not applicable because it's not a software. Even if it's obvious it's not a software, we just try to keep everything. And here it's clear that it can be the same to say, yes, it's not applicable because that, and just justify that. And this can help the regulators a lot because they maybe have this question, but if you skip it or if you don't mention it or if you don't clarify this, they will come back with a question. And one of the best advice we can try to give you is to try to make the regulator satisfied that he's not asking you any questions, that everything is there.
I think the interesting thing, looking at how this page is laid out at the moment, it shows you all the areas that you need to consider. As you said, Manu, it's a checklist.
Yeah.
But also it shows you all the areas that you need clinical data. So, when you're looking to justify these things from a marketing perspective, it's a lot bigger than just having clinical data and supporting it. It needs to, you really need to be able to justify all these claims before they're submitted under the EU MDR to your notified body to then be allowed to actually say any of these things. So it's critical that you understand all these categories within the intended purpose before we even get onto the claims.
Yeah, clear.
Excellent. So I have a question from the audience, and I think it's the right time to bring this in. So this is from Brianne. This is, what if the patient population was intended for one gender, but the SOTA and clinical data being gathered shows that the device is being used in both genders in high proportions? Do you need to redo your intended purpose? Jacqueline, I think this is a question for you.
Well, so it's one thing what the state of the art says. It's the other thing what you have data for. If your device does not have data on, let's say you only do for female population and you don't have for male or people who are transgender, you don't have the data. So you don't change your intended purpose. Your intended purpose is the data. And if you look at the definition under the EU MDR, it's the data that you can back up is your intended purpose for your device. Does that make sense?
Yes, so you can't use anything from the state of the art. You have to have data that supports your device particularly.
All your studies is only on women. You only have data to actually support that intended purpose and that gender.
Yes. Okay, so moving forwards, and this is the bit I think that marketing get a lot more excited about. We certainly do. So then it goes on to what does your device do, or what does the device do? And this is really looking at claims. And what I wanted to really address here is all the different types of claims that there are, and what actually these different claims are, because then you can start to understand the type of data that you need to create in order to make these claims. So in order for time, Mania, would you mind taking the performance claims and non-clinical claims? And Jacqueline, would you mind taking the benefit claims and the healthcare claims?
Yeah, so the performance claims, mainly, you have to explain what your device, I mean, the fact that your device can do something. So what mainly you are promoting here to say my device is capable to save your life in 30 seconds. Okay, so this is your claim. So here, for example, the device makes an incision of 4 centimeters. So means that normally you have here, to be clear, is it 4 exactly, 4 plus, 4 minus? What is the objective of 4? There is also a lot of things that you have here to understand for that. The ergonomic claims, like the device sits optimally on a specific place in the body. So it means that, for example, you say my device, as soon as you are implanting that, it will not move. It will not go somewhere else on the body. But the point here is that if you put that, it can be some claims because you say, oh, my competitor cannot do that, so I can do that. The point here for any performance claims is not just to put a performance claim, is also to prove it, is to explain that I can do it. I mean, I have the products, and here is the proof that I can do it. Here is the proof that after maybe implanting the device, we made it on multiple patients, and we after maybe 6 months, we looked at the position of the device and still stayed at the same place. Okay, now let's wait for 1 year because maybe we have to look at a long time period. Then after 1 year, the device stayed at the same place, etc., etc. So you have to prove it, and sometimes performance claims can be proved only when you are doing your clinical investigation. You are really testing on humans. Some other time you can use some equivalent devices to verify that my product is equivalent to another one. So then I can claim what they are claiming, if I can say. But mainly performance claims are here. We are talking about what are you promising? What is your promise about your device? And this is the place where marketing is really, if I can say, really creative, with a lot of promise. We can do this, we can do that. But yeah, when we look clearly at those claims, then we have the problem of proving that. And when we ask for the proof, sometimes the answer is, oh, it's obvious, but obvious is not something that the regulators will look at. So they will really look at proofs that it's working there.
I think the ergonomic claims, it's very true. You know, you can say, oh, you know, as part of the claim, oh, it sits optimally on the eye because you think it does, not realizing that actually you need to justify that. So you can't make any claims like that until you have justified it and it's in your intended purpose.
Exactly. And and what we mentioned also is something, as I said, about marketing is the fact that here, for example, we make a performance claim. We prove the performance claim, so we prove it. But marketing sometimes are taking the claim and are using a synonym of different vocabulary, something that sounds more shiny, more great, more salesy, if I can say. And then they are using that. And sometimes this also change completely the claim. So we have also to be careful on when we have a claim that we are defining as a team, like a performance claim, we have also to be careful that the vocabulary used by marketing or when we are going outside to the people is not really changing the claim. We have really to stick to it because regulators will see that. And as soon as there is some kind of misleading information, the regulators will stop it and say, no, we are not accepting this claim here.
And so I know we're spending quite a while on this, but so when you do submit your claims to the regulators, will they also ask to see your marketing material? So if the marketers have been creative with the language, will they ask to see example materials, or once you've got approval, retrospectively ask to see materials as well?
No, they ask it directly to technical documentation. There is a section on technical documentation for brochure, and then we have to show them how it is mentioned, what are the claims. We have to look at all the things. They may, I suppose, because under MDD we had this case, so under MDR that we have also that. They may also just, before an audit, that they will come to audit you, because we have a regular audit with the notified bodies. Before an audit, they may check what is on your website. And we had some auditors that have made that and say, oh, you have written this, you have written that, but I'm not sure that this is true. So can you clarify this to us? So everything that you are putting on the website is public. So notified body can also, before to come to visit you, check what you are writing. And then they are innocently asking you some questions, but then they know where they are going, and they are just trying to gather more information that maybe you are lying to them, or that you are not really honest with what you are saying. So you have also to be careful to anything that you are writing on brochures, on websites. I have a customer where we have to remove a lot of its claims on the website because the MHRA made a comment to them, and they said, no, we don't accept your device because it's claiming this and that when it's not true. So we had to clean a lot of the website because of that. So it's why it's important, the claims, the performance claims that you are making is seen by everybody. So you have to be careful.
And this is why regulatory teams are so tight on marketing, because of this exact issue. If we then say things that we can't say because we're not aware of exactly what's in the intended purpose, we end up getting the company into trouble.
Exactly. I think what's really important to say there is what you said about misleading, because under the EU MDR, Article 7 is the only time marketing's mentioned, and it says you have to mention, it has to be in line with your intended purpose and cannot be misleading. So I think anything that changing language in a certain way, if anyone can think it's being misleading, you're breaking the EU MDR. So that's something that you need to think about. If you want to make a claim in a certain phrasing, it's better to have that phrasing in your intended purpose, have all that data backed up, and then you can use it on your website, in your social media, and in your brochures. Exactly. No, it's clear.
And there is also marketing regulations that are very strict around misleading consumers.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, as Mania also said, in your technical document, it's section 2 of your technical document, we encourage our customers to lay it all out. So all your IFUs, all your brochures, all your labels, all your websites, your specific websites, maybe for training, even if you've done a clinical investigation, it won't be your website, but it will be of the principal investigator, to actually have the address of that website. And you must, we encourage them to make sure that nothing is out of line, even with your clinical investigation, your intended population, all those things. It needs to be non-misleading. And to me, one of the things that Mania said is like, be transparent.
Yeah.
You know, when they see that absolute open transparency, there's nothing out of the ordinary, but we're really open for any feedback, how we can improve it. You take that attitude towards it, that is when these audits actually become really helpful, and you can get very good information also from your auditors of like where kind of future audits might head to.
One advice: never lie to an auditor during an audit. Say, I don't know, I will check, I will verify, but never lie to them, because as I've said to you, they have their strategy behind, they have made their homework before coming. So don't think that they are sometimes asking you questions just for curiosity. They know where they are going. So never lie to them. Just say them the truth, or just say, I will check, I will verify, and you go to your team and verify all the information. But never say something just because you want to say something and say, yeah, true, we are doing that. No, I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. So say it and be transparent for that also.
Okay, so I have a question that's come in. Does the checklist that we've just gone through on the previous slide also fit to IVDR products? Mania?
Not sure that all are fitting to it. The problem is that IVDR, so here, for example, we are talking about MDR, which is a product that is normally touching a patient or influencing a patient, if I can say, in his behavior or in his activity or disease. An IVDR, we talk about maybe getting a sample from a patient and then analyzing this sample in vitro, which is not then the elements that we had, like on contact on the body, environment of use, etc. Can be, if I can say, different, but most of it is also something that will be needed for the technical documentation under IVDR. You just have maybe to change some of the elements because they are not applicable at all to IVDR.
Okay. An interesting point actually we were bringing up before about not deceiving patients when we're talking about marketing. It's not just about these claims. So one thing that we always have to look really carefully into, if you have your intended purpose as a population over a certain age, then all your imagery must reflect that as well. So deceiving somebody is reflective of all text, imagery and everything. So it's not just within these claims. It's everything else that you put out there, which is obviously when you're talking about the website and brochures as well and things like that.
No, it's clear.
Munir, continue on with non-clinical claims and then we'll rush over to the other side.
Yeah, so non-clinical claims, these are information that you may provide just, if I can say, for providing information on economic claims or elements that you have, if I can say, on your databases or things that you see as non-economical. For example, the fact that your product, non-clinical, for example, the fact that, for example, your product has some environmental claims. For example, let's say that it's not clinical at all, it's maybe more marketing, but it's more like something that I claim that my product is good for the environment, my product is good for the economy also, etc. Things that are not linked precisely to the use on the patient as a clinical claim. So mainly this is the point where you can write them here. The elements that are written there, it's only for, if I can say, your information. Maybe I have some cases, but I never wrote those information directly on the technical documentation. It's more for you, for your information, for things that maybe can also be used by the marketing people to say, okay, we have that and it was validated and we can use that for saying that on the public, which is not medical, but it's more about additional elements that can be said by the marketing people or anybody that is selling the device.
So one question actually that's come in that you just touched on during that answer, and I'd just like to go over it again. So the question is, would environmental claims fall under economic claims? And as an example, if it was claimed that a plastic product was biodegradable, would that fall under non-clinical economic claims? Yeah,
be careful also of material claims, if I can say. You have also to verify. There is also here a link between the material used and also the clinical aspect for the patient. So if it's a biodegradable material that is used as an implant for the patient, and if it's used for a hip implant, for example, I'm not really recommending this kind of material to be used, but you have also to be careful that the choice environmental use that you want to do, claim that you want to do, is not impacting in the long term also the clinical claims for your device. So you have also to be careful of that. But yes, this goes also on the economical claims or anything that is non-clinical there.
Great. Jacqueline, benefit claims.
So the benefit claims, and I think this is what we all dream about, is what sells these products, is like, what benefit does it have to the patients? But we also mustn't forget the user. So any benefits of, do the duration of the procedure in a shorter period of time. For the patient, does your wounds heal faster? And these are these really chunky competitive statements that we can make, that we try and like size each other up with competing products in the market. So that is like what the dream is about, is your benefit claims. Your healthcare claims is more, if we look a little bit broader. So we spoke about if your device enables them to do it in half the time, obviously you have more theatre time. Let's say it was a surgical product. So in half the time you can do this procedure, which means you can help another patient, which means the NHS can see more patients. If you're in a private hospital, you can see more patients and you can make more money. So this is a little bit, with the healthcare setting, it's a little bit broader. Sometimes it's also, it might be a direct benefit that you say leads to less surgical site infections, but there's a way that you with health economics can actually make out and say, actually, this is saving money. So we're a little bit more expensive than another device, but because we don't have the complications, it actually will impact in lower healthcare costs.
And that's an interesting conversation as well, because if you plan all this sort of information up front from a marketing perspective, you can potentially then go and apply for NICE approval or things like that. Excellent. So this actually brings me on to so we have contraindications and risks and side effects that also need to be included in this. I think they're quite self-explanatory what they look like. So I think the next question, and I'll unshare my screen now. Who should be involved in creating the intended purpose? Because I think historically it's been very regulatory, and I think, you know, marketing probably haven't understood this as well as we could have, which would have really helped us to support in its development. Who do you feel should be involved within this? Mania?
So for me, if I would have to choose, I'll choose all the company to be involved in that. As we said, but the center should be regulatory. I mean, the main driver should be regulatory, because some piece of it is important for marketing. So marketing should be there to understand what they can claim and not claim. Clinical should be there to understand what they will have to prove, if I can say so, which clinical data they have to gather to prove all what marketing or those regulatory people try to put inside. You have the management also that has to understand all that. They have to understand, I mean, what we are trying to do here, because maybe their plan at the beginning was not to claim that at all. They want to claim something else. They want to go in another direction. Then it can change completely the product. You have the salesperson that will be in contact directly with the customer to tell him the right things and not just to promise him things that he will never be able to the product will never be able to have. We have also maybe some people like the people on the logistic, if I can say, because if you have a small box or big box or box which is sterile or non-sterile with the condition that you have to store them, etc., they maybe have to tell you, but we have no place where we can store the products at minus 20 degrees, because, I mean, unless you want to make an investment for it, but I have nothing like that. Or we have to find a supplier for transportation that has trucks that can be refrigerated. So these are all the things that you have to talk before with all those people, all the team, to understand exactly what we try to do here. And it's like a brainstorming at the end. You can try to claim whatever you want to say. Okay, I want to claim this, I want to claim that, I want to claim that. Yes. And then the clinical will say, yes, but we cannot claim that because I have no proof. I just made a PubMed search and no literature at all about that. So I have then to do a clinical investigation. Are you ready to put 1 million or 2 million on the table? So all this will be a big conflict, if I can say, a lot of chaos. But to be honest, at the end, it will be clear. The line will be clear. The paper, if you fill this paper, it will be clear. At the end, everybody will be not happy. I just said everybody has a clear thing in mind. Marketing will not be happy because they wanted to say more. But at the end, we know exactly where we are going. And we know what is the line to not pass, if I can say, the red line to say, don't say this, don't say that, because I have no data about that, etc., etc. But you have to put everybody, if I can say that.
I think marketing needs to be involved super early, and also with the chain, as many changes, there's going to be changes, they need to be discussed with that as well, because I think when people move from the MDD to the MDR, Jacqueline can probably talk about this more, but the amount of clinical data that was required was a lot more than ever before, a lot more robust. So what a lot of companies did is to not spend the millions of pounds clinical trials, potentially, they streamlined their intended purpose and took out potential indications. And I spoke to somebody once who, we had a surgical device that could be used in the ear, could be used in the nasal canal, and then they didn't actually have enough robust clinical evidence for the nasal. So they had to take that out, but they didn't tell their marketing team, didn't tell the clinical team, didn't tell the marketing team, didn't tell the sales team. And then there was a huge issue with that because yes, okay, they didn't have enough intended data for it, but actually a lot of the hospitals they were selling this product to, their main USP was that it could be used in both. And actually they should have spent me £1 million on that clinical trial because they would have made it back, but they didn't ask marketing and they just made the assumption.
You know, Becca, what that is complaint after complaint. That is a foreseeable misuse, and that you have to report.
Yeah,
and you have to keep track of it. So every single case that was used in that nasal passage goes to your complaint, your post-market surveillance, foreseeable misuse, foreseeable, and you've got to actually report on it in a document that we call the PSO. So, and some of that might become available on Udemy. So, you know, it's really not for your reputation and in your interest not to get everybody aligned. With this intended purpose, I think it's one of the second to actually deciding you're going to pursue having this device still on the market or bringing it to the market. I think it's your second most important decision after okaying the business development plan. And I would argue, while you're formulating your business development plan, that's when you formulate your intended purpose. And I agree with Mania, the whole team, the whole shmabang. I want sales and marketing, business development, the senior leadership has to be there to look at it. Because at the end of the day, senior leadership looks at that device and says, well, this is how we're projecting. We're going to make back our return on the investment and we're going to take this share of the market, etc. It's good to bring that ambitions in line to say, well, that's fantastic. So you're taking the whole population. So I know you're saying that you're going to have profits by year 5, but unfortunately, I want £5 million to do a clinical trial, because if you straight away want that population, then we're going to also delay, because we've got to do 2 years worth of trials, and hopefully we can recruit all those patients by the 2-year mark. And suddenly you have a very different business understanding. And I think if we had the intended purpose as an early discussion, there's a lot of battles that regulatory, clinical affairs, marketing does not have to have later down the line.
Totally agree with that. I think one of the biggest things that we see is, as marketing, we have companies that have great claims, they want to say amazing things, they put it all over their brochures or their conference booth banners. It goes to regulatory, and regulatory go, you can't say any of this. And I think, and then it turns into this huge big argument 15 minutes before the print deadline. And that should never happen, because you as a team should be involved in your regulatory decision with your intended purpose. And then if there are any changes that are made, marketing should know, because it affects everything you say, your website, your social media, what your reps say. You know, everybody needs to be very much in line with this, and they need to know their device's intended purpose like the back of their hand. And if they don't, that's a concern.
But Becca, imagine a different way of doing this. Imagine the excitement if everybody was aligned day one under the business development plan. And we started saying, like, you know, at year 1, we're going to get registered. We can't claim much, but we're in the market and we can start with post-market clinical follow-up. So, you know, regulatory stances of actually doing trials on things that as CE marked is not as onerous. So then we can start that. And guess what, marketing? Year 2, we can add an indication to you and we can add this claim. Year 3, you've got a campaign for this and this and this. Year 4, year 5, year 6, it gets you really excited about a product because you can feel this product evolving over time. And I think we really have to change the way that we see this intended purpose to getting buy-in early on, and getting everybody on board is actually very exciting. And you have so many people pushing your product and getting all that data and things and buying in on it, that there can only be synergy and there can only be good things that come out of that.
Jacqueline, I need to confirm something with you. So we've spoken about this a lot, but just to confirm for everybody on the webinar, and I've actually had a couple of questions coming about this as well. We will address all the questions in about 5 minutes. There's a lot that have come in. So Jacqueline, you spoke about intended purpose, and we've been speaking about intended purpose and the initial creation of it, which has to happen as early as possible within your business development plan, so you know what clinical data you need to create. How does that work over time? Because you do all this work on your initial intended purpose. How do you stretch that over time? How does your intended purpose work over time with the regulatory bodies as well? So can you update your intended purpose as you go? What's the easiest way to do that? How do we do that?
So if you're with me on this, Minia, it's like initially, every time you want to change your intended purpose, it is immediately classified regulatory as a significant change. And it's very easy to understand if you just think of the logic. If you initially couldn't claim certain things and your intended purpose was really small and didn't claim too much and just did the basics, for every add-on that you do, you've got to actually provide the evidence. You know, just because you're on the market initially doesn't like give you free license to suddenly you could claim more and more. So it is, again, a very rigorous thing. If you say we are adjusting our intended purpose, they immediately has the order to say that is a significant change, justify all the data for this change in intended purpose. And again, it comes back to that beautiful diagram of yours, which I think would be good to have up, is if you're changing the population, if you're changing the condition, if you're adding a condition, if you are adding an intended use and purpose or intended use, or you're changing the environment, you will have to have those validations and clinical data for each and every new thing that you add on. So yeah, so here we got that beautiful slide. So with the patient population, if there's a change there, you better have data for it. The indications, if it's a new disease, you better have data for that new disease. If it's a new intended user, let's say you don't have to have somebody as skilled, you will have to have usability data to prove that it can be used in that user group. And then with your
when you initially get your intended purpose, though, when you initially submit your intended purpose, can you say to your regulatory body, this is the data we'll be collating in the future? Will that ease the pathway if you have a very strong clinical development plan?
My opinion is yes. Minia, I don't know if you agree, but in your clinical development plan, and this is one of my favorite documents, if there's such a thing as a favorite document within your technical document, this is where you put your hopes and dreams. And if your notified body initially, when they look at your clinical development plan and they just want to know, you know, preclinical, when you're now trying to register, what is everything you've done in a nutshell? That exact document as well, you can tell them what you want to do in the future, because it will link with your post-market clinical follow-up plans. So all of this, you can actually map out in your clinical development plan to let your notified body know what is coming. I think there's a lot of faith that a notified body will have in you if you can say from the start of like, we understand the data and validations we need, and we're going to slowly over time build it up, and we're going to show you that we, as a manufacturer, we are competent in doing this, that the performance is intact, and that it is safe for the users, but also the patients will benefit from this.
Mine, what are your thoughts on that? Having it in your clinical development plan?
Yeah, so you have as said Jacqueline, so you have to be, as we said, also transparent with the notified body and with the people that are reviewing all your data. You have data, you have what you have, you cannot create more, or you cannot, if I can say, invent the data. So at the end, the objective is to have sufficient clinical data that you can show to the notified body. And if you have a good plan, a good development plan where you say, I don't have all the data for that, I have few data that is proving that my product is performant, but I will gather more by doing a PMCF, I will gather more by doing this, by doing that, then the notified body is listening that. You have to convince them, you have to prove that you are really serious about that and that you are really gathering things. But yes, the data that you have are really important, but don't try to make it bigger when it's not. So just try to say, I know that it's not the perfect thing, so like 100%, I'm maybe at 90%, but just to show you that I'm really serious about that, I will do this, I will do that. Here is my plan for continuing to verify that my product is still compliant on the market.
I think it's also important to think about when you're trying to get marketing involved in this, because marketing are not going to want to hear in 5 years' time you can say this. But what they would like to hear is you have 5 years to create a fantastic marketing plan, which where Jacqueline said each year you can add something to it. If you explain it to them like this is an opportunity for you to build yourself in the market and build that picture in the audience, it is a fantastic opportunity to tell your story. And I think that's how it needs to be packaged, as this is an exciting opportunity versus these are the things that you can't do. Because I think as soon as you go down that approach, people kind of get a bit defensive and there's no need to be. I think having a fantastic clinical development plan can be an excellent opportunity for marketing. And if you sit down on day one and align, then it's going to be a fantastic opportunity.
Well, it's to differentiate yourself as well, because if you have a very strong clinical development plan and you can differentiate yourself in the market, it will take other companies significantly longer to get to where you are. So I think that's sort of the other side of it, as you're saying, Becca, is not a negative, it can actually be a real positive. Yeah.
Another thing also about clinical data, as we talk about that. So we had, if I can say, as we said, we talked about that a bit on this discussion, the transition between MDD and MDR. Yes. And we had, if I can say, a big wall that appears to a lot of companies. And it's where we had companies coming to us and asking us, can you help us? Can you help us? And we are looking at the data, and sometimes we are telling them, you don't have the data. How can you claim this? How can you claim that? There is no data. But they are coming back to us and say, yes, but we are selling this product since 20 years. It's working well. It's selling well. Everything is fine. We have never gotten any complaints, etc. So it's like that. They are coming saying, oh, my product is the perfect one, etc. But during those 20 years, you had 20 years to gather clinical data and to prove that it's fine, etc., etc. What have you done? We have some companies that are just saying, okay, now we are fine, we are selling good, so no need to invest more in gathering information or proving that we are good or this and that. And you have some companies that are in the other side. Jacqueline?
Yeah, I what you were saying, Munir, when companies say like, oh, we have all this data, we don't have to do anything more. I think you have the same reservation. You start getting a little bit, from a regulatory point of view, a bit nervous, because you're just like, the state of the art, which
exactly,
if you're in a category, this moves over time. The state of the art is not the most shiny, the best. It's just the current standards of care. And the current standards of care move. And in the NIRS world and engineering world, it is technically the bells and whistles, the software and the materials. There's so much innovation. But you know what? The medical field evolves along with it. So you might find you'll have a fantastic device that was used in a procedure, and for some reason they're now using a different device for that procedure, or the procedure they don't want to use anymore because they've just realized that there's something with less risks that you can use. So by saying like, I can just sit back, I have arrived, that is not the world that we live in.
Not anymore.
Standing still is going backwards, because everything is just moving forward.
Yeah, and just for the story, one of the customer that I had that came and had no claims at all, so he had to stop business. So he had to stop his product. He cannot sell this product anymore. So I don't know what he's doing now, but he told me that we have no money to invest on all this, so we have to stop business. And on what you've said, Jacqueline, related to the SOTA, for example, state of the art, what we are asking now, and what we should ask mainly everybody, is also to include this moving part, if I can say, as you mentioned, on the post-marketing surveillance. So you go each year on the market to verify if your product is good, but also check if the SOTA is still at the same place, if I can say, or if there is no new technologies coming, no new things that are making your product really obsolete, if I can say, because this can help you also to see some kind of signal to say, hey guys, let's gather data, or let's try to improve this, or let's try to move forward there.
think bringing marketing back into that, I think no marketer wants to find out that there's a product that's performing better or is becoming more state of the art than them. You want to always be leading. And I think if you work with regulatory and you both go together and say, we're seeing these things pop up and we don't want to fall behind, we don't want to stand still or move backwards, that's a really powerful thing to be taken to leadership when there's multiple departments saying the same thing, which is why it's so important that marketing and regulatory do have a good relationship.
Absolutely. Right. I have a few more questions and then I'll let everybody go because we're already overrunning.
Okay.
I've not even got through all the questions. I think there's so much to discuss on this topic. We could definitely do about another 12 webinars on this, maybe more. Okay, so I've got a question for Becca. Actually, there's a couple of questions around this topic, but the main question here is, how does the intended purpose affect social media claims?
Same way affects everything else. So you need to be in line with your intended purpose and you can't be misleading. I think I saw a second question by you, Marta, about marketing teams thinking nobody's checking. They are checking, you know, as Manuel mentioned at the beginning, when it comes to an auditor, they're going to check your website and they will probably also check your social media as well. So it's really important that you're making that intended purpose match. And when it goes back to data and things, you can have clinical data, but it needs to be what's in your intended purpose. If it's not in your intended purpose, you can't be talking about it as a claim. You can't have it on your social media. And I think you just need to be really strict on that. I know it's probably easier said than done, but it needs to happen.
Yes. So the other thing I just want to talk about, we've been talking a lot about the intended purpose today. Does the intended purpose apply to all geographies? Mania.
Yes, I would say.
Within Europe. What about outside of Europe?
No, I mean, the intention or the philosophy. The intention or philosophy of intended purpose, yes, apply to everyone.
I think what is asked is the terminology intended purpose. Is that being used by FDA?
No, they are using something else. Indication for use, something like that. Yeah, they are using another vocabulary. But yeah, I was talking more about the philosophy of intended purpose. It's applicable to everybody. Everybody is looking at that. But yeah, on terms of vocabulary, there can be some different vocabulary. You have also even the same kind of elements in the pharma industry, but they call it something else also. I cannot remember how they call it. But you have this is existing everywhere. You have to tell to everybody why you use this product, who should use it, how to use it, when to use it, etc. So you have to be clear on that. But yeah, everybody's using their different vocabulary for that.
It's really problematic.
Yeah, it is.
Across the world, regulatory, we know what they're trying to say, but the terminology isn't harmonized.
Exactly.
It's intended purpose in Europe, it's indication in TGA Australia, it's indications for use in the US, and you kind of think it's the same. And I see a lot of US companies come to us and they just like, oh, it's just, you just copy paste this.
Exactly.
And you go, stand right still, do not move, do not publish this on European soil. Hold on. And this is, I think it's a very good point, is that when you've got a business development plan for a product, if you start translating your clinical development plan, and your clinical development plan, your business plan is international, but it is a nice stepping point that if you use, and I like the European framework because it covers, I don't know how you feel about this, Munir, but I feel it covers everything in the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
So if you use Munir's way of the whole boxes of filling in everything and making sure that everything is applicable, when you literally translate your European file to a 510K file, you're just matching definitions, and it's just so much easier to put it together. But if you don't have that high up clinical development plan that is merged with your business development plan of where you want to be, what markets you want to seize, you can make it extremely onerous trying to go to another country, and it need not be. So yes, very good question. These terms are not harmonized across the world. Indication doesn't mean the same thing here than it does in the US, than it does in a place like Australia or Singapore.
Excellent. Good. So we're running over now. I've got one more fast fire question for everybody. We have got a couple of questions we haven't managed to answer. We will answer them afterwards and send them out. But I will start with Jacqueline, I'll go to Manir, and then I'll go to Becca. So what do you think is the biggest error companies make when creating an intended purpose from a marketing perspective?
They don't know what it is, and they try and claim everything in the kitchen sink in one intent. It's too broad.
And what's the implication of that? What goes wrong when that happens?
Poor Manir has to sit there and talk to the auditor and kind of say, this is our ambition. And the auditor says, sure, what's your data? And you go, well, I only have for this. And he says, shave off the 9 out of 10. And poor Manir has to go back and head off the bad news. Manir doesn't want to give marketing the bad news, but the auditor says no.
So trying to go to too broad a number of indications. Manir, what do you think?
I think the same, to not be precise enough. I see a lot of time when I ask people to send me their intended purpose or just to send me their technical file. When I see patient population, they say everyone. When I say indication, they say every disease. When I say, I mean, it's like, guys, I mean, help me please, because what can I do here? And it's more like not sharp, precise enough, if I can say, where we can be really talking specifically about this, and this is for this cannot be for that, you should not be using this for this, only this person should use that. And sometimes, it's funny because when you talk with some manufacturers, when you start to ask them those questions, say, oh, this is an interesting question. We should maybe be more precise on this and that, because it's true that we are not doing this and we are not doing that. And say, yes, you have to be really more precise. So they are voluntary to do that. It's just as said also, Jacqueline, they don't know about it. They don't know exactly what should be inside. And sometimes when we say intended purpose, they just say, oh, it is for this disease. And it's all. Here is the intended purpose. It's one sentence and it doesn't help a lot. So helping them to understand exactly what should be inside and having a standardization like what we have here on the slide that you showed can help a lot. A guidance also, maybe they should, NDCG maybe should do a guidance on the intended purpose and just put all those things. I mean, will help a lot of people there.
Excellent. I think, as I said, when I watched your webinar on the intended purpose and you broke everything out so simply, suddenly I realized, that's actually what's in the intended purpose. This is the implications of clinical data, and this is the implications to marketing. And I think it was just never broken out that simply before. So it's sort of like a Pandora's box of what is the intended purpose. So yes, I think understanding each individual part makes a huge difference.
Exactly.
Becca.
For me, I think it's not asking marketing what they want to say. Marketing knows that. Yeah, I would say that. But marketers are hopefully speaking to their market regularly. They know what the claims need to be. They know what the surgeons and doctors need, and sort of reporting that back to regulatory so we can find the data or get the data for that, I think is really important, because it's great having a claim that you have data for, but if it's for something that no one's going to use, then that's not worked either. So it's important to not only have the data for the intended use, it's about having the right data for the right claim.
Yes.
And just maybe to add to that, what we're trying to say also here is marketing for marketing, let's them be creative. It's not a problem, but let's them be creative at the beginning, that we can already cut a lot of things from the beginning to say, if we want this, we need that. If we want this, we need that. And then management can decide to let's go to this or let's go to that. But what I like is, as I said, it's why I use the word brainstorming. When we do a brainstorming, the methodology is like gather all the ideas from everybody, put it on the table, and then after that, you don't censor anyone. And then after that, you can then say, oh, this one we cannot because of that. Or if we want to do it, then we do that, etc., etc. So don't use also this tool as just like a regulatory to block everything. Don't do this, don't do that. No, we can do it. We just need maybe more investment, or we need another strategy. But use it also as a creative tool to just try to gather all the information from everyone, because marketing people, sales people, they talk to the doctors, the surgeons, so they know what they want. So if we can say, as you've said, Becca, that we cannot provide that, at the end it's like, okay, why do I need to why do you need to try to sell that or to make efforts to make that on the market, when at the end it will not be better than the competition, if I can say so. So it's important that.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's about, you know what your USP is for your device. You know what you want to be able to say on your social media posts in when your reps are in the OR. So it's about giving that information to regulatory at the beginning, not when they're 2 years into their clinical data studies and they've not got any of the data that you need to have that USP.
It's a democracy. This is what Manir is saying.
Yeah.
We want everybody's eyes and ears, insight and opinion in this to make this device work. And I must say, like, it's the worst thing is regulatory to be seen as the party pooper. Regulatory is just as excited if, you know, all your claims and things are seen by the notified body and they just kind of like, this is good, it's well put together. Yeah, thank you for, you know, it's also satisfying for them. But when they're looking at your, what you've given them as far as data is concerned, and they know that, oh, there's not enough information. Really? You want me to go in there? Like, they are going to ask? No, they're not going to overlook this. It's really hard on regulatory and not satisfying, like kind of being, I don't want to be the poppy pooper. I don't think that's being truthful. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and maybe just the last thing. So
Yes.
as what you said, so mainly, as you said, so when we have sometime those discussions that we talked about, the intended purpose, etc., they are made by management and maybe marketing without including the regulatory people. And then when we arrive at the end, then we include regulatory because we need them to register the device, and then regulatory says we cannot do this, we cannot do that, or etc. So this is also something that can be a problem if you don't include regulatory also early in your discussion, when you have an idea of a product, when you have a strategy in place, and you say, oh, we'll talk with the regulatory at the end when we have the prototype and everything designed, because then maybe it's already too late. So don't blame regulatory because maybe you put them at the end of the line and waiting then and pushing them then to register your device as quick as possible because you had a deadline, etc. for the registration. No, put them from the beginning. They will save your life or save the project also.
And don't skim on the work that engineering needs to do.
Yeah.
Validations cost money. And the poor clinical investigation team, your clinical affairs team, takes money to do studies. So if you're going to go for a really wild, broad intended purpose, like, open up your wallet, because pre-market studies are really expensive.
It's clear.
So thank you, everybody, for joining, or for all the panelists here tonight. I think what the clear message that I'm hearing out of here is we need to start intended purpose discussions as early as possible, and we need to understand all the documents that fall off that. So the clinical development plans, we understand where the marketing strategy is going, and we can only talk about what is in the intended purpose. So it's really important this document is understood, but everybody brings different things to that party. So make sure everybody gets involved as quickly as possible to deliver really effective intended purpose. Excellent. Manir, Jacqueline, Becca, thank you so much for your time this evening. I really appreciate it. This is the first in a series of webinars. It's really to share as much knowledge around medical device marketing and leave no stone unturned. So what a fantastic start. And just thank you very much for your time and everybody on the webinar. We will be answering the additional questions and sending them out as well. Also putting the webinar is recorded, so we can also send it out that way as well.
Great. Thank you for an invitation. And it was really great. And I hope, we helped a lot of people to understand more about intended purpose then.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.